All right, cool. We're good to go. Thank you everyone for your patience. Sometimes life's chaotic. We all survive. So we are in week 12 of the semester. Originally, this was gonna be the last day that I was really lecturing, but then last week we did not cover everything I wanted to, so we'll probably still have to go over some more stuff next week. But that is okay. As time goes on, we'll be less talking, more working during the time that we have. I wanted to go over something happening in the department before I got into our class. I personally will be coming down tomorrow for this. If you are someone who's newer to graphic design BFA, you might not know what it is. But in big part of doing the graphic design thesis when you're a senior, you get your BFA, is your kind of like your final for thesis 1 is you present to the department on what your thesis topic is and kind of talk through the rationale of your project, like other similar projects. And I think it's a good thing, really good thing to go to, especially if you're a junior, especially if you're a sophomore, because it's a good time to start processing what thesis topics are, because they can have a big implication for the rest of your life and your career if you play your cards right in a positive way. So going, listening to what they're doing might help your subconscious mind start to process it, so you do not arrive to the fall semester of your thesis year and are like, oh my god, I don't know what I'm doing. You don't want to end up in that decision. So I'd say whenever there's opportunities, see what other people's theses look like and what that process looks like, try your best to go to them, because it will make your own experience in thesis feel a lot less scary, because you'll have seen what it looks like, and you presenting will be your first time going to it. I do think they do it optionally now. I was saying earlier that back when I was a student, we were required to, but I think most people do present. So definitely worth checking out. I linked it on the blog. It's going to be in the Science Hall 181. Me and Stanley will be here. I brought him last year. It seemed to be a problem. It's 4-minute presentations. That's some of the most stressful 4 minutes of my life. I don't know why I was so impressed, but it was. So all BFA graphic design majors strongly encouraged to attend. So you should attend. You guys see Stanley a second day in a row per week, so consider that. I also, since it's 7 to 9, I can come a little early if people need to meet up and pair on stuff. I just meet you in the lab beforehand. Also willing to kind of come over here after before I head home. So if you, for whatever reason, don't do one-on-one time today and you'd like to, let me know, and maybe we can work something out since I'll already be here tomorrow. Our main gig today in class, we're doing CSS demos, and then we're going to be working more on our projects. And I know lots of people are kind of different stages of the process. That is okay. We're going to be working on stuff in the order we can. Even from my perspective, this semester I'm redoing my example materials for this class, and frankly, I'm a little behind in them too. I spent a lot of today working on my wireframes, if I'm being honest, in my site now. So there's nothing wrong with making sure you have a strong foundation before moving too far ahead. So just because we're doing some stuff with code right now in the demos, you can still follow along if you want. You can try experimenting with stuff, but if you are feeling like you're a little bit behind, I really encourage you to focus your energy on having a strong understanding of your content, really take inventory of what you want to put in your site, what images, information resources and stuff you want to refer to as you do your wireframes and your mockups, because that makes doing them a lot easier. And same thing in the next stage process. If you have really strong wireframes with your information properly filled out, it's going to make doing your mockups a lot easier. Just my mockups aren't done yet. Maybe yours aren't. That's okay. I just really want to encourage folks to make sure you see the process through correctly, instead of having to backtrack and reverse engineer stuff, because that can be really annoying and hard. And you're not going to get in trouble for your whole website not being done a week before final. You have until final to finish your website, and we're going to keep having time to work together on it, and it is fine. So I wanted to show that, like, this is like more of what I'm expecting from the site map, because I feel like I've been kind of showing like a bad example because I've been kind of half-assing it, the examples. I just want to make sure you guys see what like it really should look like. Like I'm saying, oh, I want my rinks section to have like photos of each rink, link to the website, its hours, social media, whatever. But then I'm like going around and like actually rounding that stuff up for myself. So that way I don't have to make it up or make mockups that don't account for a critical piece of information. So now when I go back later this week and I try to do my mockups, I don't have all my images to work with and they're all my images. So I actually just like, these are all from my Google Photos. And so I just like dropped little Google Photos and installed there for myself, so I can open them pretty easily and download them to use them in my mockups in my actual site. So that is worth considering. If you're like having a little bit of trouble doing task management in this class, with a lot of open things that you don't believe you're done with. Start from the beginning, work your way over. All of it will come to you much more easily if you don't try to. Wow. It's all right. Sometimes you just it's a lot easier to do everything when you've seen through the design process the way you're supposed to. He's back, he's up, he's chasing his tail. He's ready to rumble. All right, cool. So today we're going to cover a few new CSS topics. And I'm going to kind of go over them as I'm styling some of the core components of my website, because I don't have, as you saw in my Figma, I really don't have my pages figured out all that well yet. And honestly, in my wireframes, I started like getting ideas about other ways, other things I should be like incorporating in. Like I was like, oh, should I like be putting information at the top of my page, like about like what these different kinds of skating are, and like suggestions for gear for doing a particular thing. I don't know. But that's okay, because I can still work on the part that I do have hashed out, which is like my header. I'm pretty sure about how it's gonna work. So I feel pretty okay about moving forward code-wise with this. If you have the static site generator set up, a friendly reminder, if you're like, I want to run it, but I literally don't know how. You're gonna hit the 3 lines. You're gonna go into the terminal, new terminal, and then remember we have this README doc. And it does in fact have the information for. I wonder if I could look at it not in code mode then. Kind of annoying. I guess that's fine. What I'm looking for is okay. You just have to run npm start. So I'm going to run npm start, and that starts all of the web development magic that makes your site run. Make sure you are working in a fork and not working in the base repo that I have as a starting point. If you have not made your fork yet, friendly reminder to all. I'll show that really quick in case anyone needs the reminder. You would go into npzweb/site generator. That's just github.com/npzweb/site generator. And you're going to hit this button. It says fork. What up?
When we fork it, do we have to link it back to our
repo? No, you do not. It's going to make a new repo, and you're going to copy and paste most stuff, and we'll probably do a lot of that. Like I can go around there and do that.
So we don't have to link the new one back to the old one?
No. Okay. You could like what I did last time when I did the demo was I just had 2 tabs open. I was like copying my CSS over basically, and that's fine. Yes, so make sure you were doing the fork. It looks like many of you have not figured out how to do fork because there's only 2 forks. So that's an indicator to me. But if you, I would say don't try to do this yourself right now while I'm talking about CSS stuff, because you will not retain CSS stuff at all if you are distracted the whole time. So like you can try out some CSS stuff I'm demonstrating on your single page repository for now, because you can always bring CSS over later. So if you want to just run your one that you have and then go live button to work on it, that is fine. We can work on. It sounds like most of the one-on-one tax segment classes.
I didn't get it. I just wasn't sure because now it's separate from the one I had before.
Yeah, that's also. Okay, cool. So whatever CSS file, if you wanna follow along, you can, if you just wanna watch, that's also fine. So I'm gonna run npm start. Hello? Please go, okay, there we go. It's gonna do a bunch of stuff. Let's give it a second. I should have hit this earlier, but that's fine. Okay, and you're gonna get a little pop-up that says port 8080 is available. Also, if you don't get this pop-up or you close it by accident, there's this thing right here, it says port, and it gets a number 1 next to it. And if you click on that, there's a link that you can click on. That's the globe. Specifically, it's the globe right there. Open in browser, and that will open what you have built thus far. Okay. What was I going over first? That's why I always write things down. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to go over first today is a very simple topic. And if you're working on your old repo, that is okay, because this one is more just about how we are organizing our style sheets. I'm gonna move this down out of my way, so I don't need to deal with it right now. And we're gonna kind of look through what I have set up so far, because I was using the comment structure. I recommend that you all do, but I never really fully was like, this is how you should do it. So I will go over a couple of file organization strategies when it comes to CSS. A lot of the time, you'll see folks work in just one CSS file called style.css, which is a perfectly nice way to do styling. Totally fun. A lot of times, those style sheets, especially the more pages your website has and the more sections you end up adding for specific pages, the longer the style sheet gets, and it turns into a lot of lines of code. And while VS Code and code spaces do give you this little thing, like lets you preview the whole file, notice it goes the whole full length of the window, because these files can get really long. So it's really, really important to be able to not accidentally write the same CSS twice. That first of all, you're always looking at the line number in DevTools. You're like, why is this like this? Like finding the original place of stuff and backtracking and editing it, as opposed to just continuously adding more CSS, but also keeping your style sheet organized. So like you'll notice I have my first section that says global. It's just in a CSS comment, which as a reminder is the slash that's next to your shift key and a star, and then you can write whatever you want, and then another star and a slash. And that is a CSS comment. And basically it is simply a tool for you to leave notes for yourself. If you're somebody that does better, if you can like write down what something does and that helps you learn, that's fine, like you can do that. So like I've met people in my life that when they were learning how to do a new coding language, they would like leave notes to themselves like sets font for headings. Because like some people, they just like look at CSS and it means nothing to them. And so something that can help some folks is just leaving little notes about like what stuff does in their own words to themselves. Nothing wrong with doing that. Usually how I use comments, unless I do something that's like really complex in CSS or my selector makes me go like, what is this? Was I even styling? For the most part, I just use it to organize. So like I have this first one that says global. And usually the stuff that gets targeted under global is either HTML elements that show up on every page and stuff I want to happen on every single page. So maybe I'll leave a note about that. Stuff on every page. Think like recurring elements like, oh, I just want all of my headers, H1, H2, H3 to use this font on the whole website. Like anything you want to have on the entire website, you can put in your global and you should put it at the top of your page. Because if we think back to when we initially started talking about CSS, I talked about how recency plays a role in overriding CSS. So let's say I set this CSS rule for my headers up here, but then later on a different page, I want to do something different with my H1 or H2 for some reason. If I add styling for H1 or H2 and I want to override it, it will work better and more reliably if I do it further down the page. So style sheet always goes most global, meaning stuff that happens everywhere, to most specific, to things that happen on maybe only one place ever. And then all the way at the bottom is gonna go our media queries, which I'm going to talk about later. So we have our global, and then usually from there, I'll go homepage, like I'll start doing page specific styles. So then I have one for like my rinks, my trails, my skate parks. You'll remember last class when I was setting up my HTML files for my pages, I was on the body tag of each page, just adding a class that says that page's name. So that way I don't have to write as many custom classes if I do like different styling on other pages. Like I find it's a lot easier to write selectors when you have that body class equals and like a page unique name or phrase. Because that makes it so in my style sheet, I can just do like dot, whatever the class I put, I like to just do a short version of the page name. And then whatever selector I want, which in this case, I think I was doing active links. I don't know why I did it with the nth child selector. That was kind of chaotic of me. A better way to do that probably would be in my header, just giving all the links a custom class. And just saying if this link on this page may be bold, but that's okay. There's different ways to do things. Okay, so I have my different pages set up. I have my style sheet. I have global to whole website and then to pages. But even within global, you can organize it a bit more. Like right now, I'm actually a little bit disorganized, so I might advocate for organizing it even further. So like, I know that every page has a header and a footer. And maybe I also have some rules about layout that I want to do on all my pages. And so I'll just make sections for those. And now I'm gonna check to make sure I don't already have rules that go to specific things. I think the only thing I really need to put in a specific section of global is my header, the logo image, that definitely belongs in the header. And then for main, I can put that under layout. So like you can always move stuff around and reorganize it. You want to make it so it's as easy for you to read as possible. When you think about this applied in the real world, it's actually very rare that you'd ever really work on a website alone. So also thinking about like if somebody who's never looked at my repository before in their life got dropped into it, would they be able to figure out where they needed to go to edit something? Which is part of the reason why, like, nothing wrong with working on CSS file if you want to, feel free. But if you're somebody that's like, I like things to be really modular and broken up, something you do have as an option is, I actually did this for the menu because I wrote a ton of code for it and I didn't want it to be in your style sheet and be confusing. So I actually made another CSS file called menu.css. And so then in my head, I just load both style sheets. Like you can load as many style sheets as you want. There's no limit on it. So if you decide like, oh, I want to make a style sheet in my header, a style sheet for each page, like, yeah, you can. Nothing wrong with it. But if you're like, I don't think I'm writing that much CSS, it's not necessary. That's also cool. Like it's transitive property. It all comes together in the end. As long as you load them all on the page, the CSS will work the same. But I will say if you load multiple CSS files, do know the order you put them matters. Like if you write, like if I wrote styles to style my navigation in my style sheet, menu's getting loaded after it, so menu would override my style sheet. And vice versa. So whatever you tell the browser most recently, that's what's gonna listen to. It'll still listen to both of them, but if they both are styling the same thing and do like the same property but different values, that's where the order matters. So that's all. Okay. Style sheet organization. So TLDR, use comments, leave notes to yourself. Keep your style sheet organized, go from most global to most specific. Boom. Oh, what else did I want to go over? Pseudo selectors. Okay. Actually, what we'll do is we will style by navigation because that will allow me to go over the menu.css file. It will allow me to go over transitions, and it will allow me to go over pseudo selectors. So multiple W's all in one thing. So I want to style my navigation. I have my Figma open. I'll make sure I have it open to my mockups. And I can see how I intended to style this. Okay, so we're gonna look at what we have here. I'm gonna make sure I'm in the inspect mode. Cool. First things first, I want to make sure my menu icon is the color I actually want it to be. So anytime I want to style something that looks like it's already been styled, I'm going to make sure that there's not existing styles somewhere else already. And there's no background. Do you have a full color somewhere? Menu. I might actually have to set up something already. Background, that's fine. Okay. Is there a way to? They're all gonna need to figure out how to do this. So, please, no property on this. Okay, yeah, I totally can. Okay, cool. So the way, if I want to style this menu, it's actually not configured anywhere right now. By default, SVGs fill in black. And this uses an SVG, and if you don't know this already, an SVG is what's called a vector-based image file, which, like, if you make a full vector graphic in Adobe Illustrator and you export it out, one of your options to keep it a vector, keep it infinitely scaling, making it be an SVG. That is what is happening here. In the web, we quite like SVGs for anything that is like a flat image, because it allows it to not get pixelated at any scale, but they're also quite efficient files. They don't like take up a lot of like asset loading or anything, so they don't slow down your page load. Like a lot of SVGs are actually code files, so like oftentimes people will do an inline SVG, they'll just plop it right into the page and not use an image tag, which seems to be what is happening in the menu I found on the internet for us all to use, which is cool. And it's quite easy to style because it doesn't have any styles to override from anywhere. So if I want to style this, I am going to go into my style sheets, and I'm going to find a good selector to make sure I get a hold of it right. So it looks like my button that's holding the SVG has a class, so I'll make use of that class. So I'm going to do dot account class. I'm going to put my class there, and then I want to make sure I'm targeting the SVG inside of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit space, and then I'm going to do SVG. So I'm saying the SVG file that lives inside the button toggle menu, and I'm going to say fill, which is a different property than we normally use. Normally we use background for stuff, but SVGs, you can set their color using fill. Doesn't always work. It depends on how the person wrote the code for the SVG. Lucky for us, this one was written nicely and it's not hard to get. So I'm going to go into dev mode in Figma to grab my hex code. There it is. Copied. Love Figma dev tools. And we're going to let that be there over here, and the color has been changed for us. Great. Next thing I got to think about is my navlinks. They look absolutely nothing like my Figma does at the moment, so I got to figure that out. So I am going to go in here, and once again, I'm going to make use of some of the code Figma gives me, not all of it, because a lot of it is garbage, but some of it's quite helpful. So the layout stuff, not helpful. Not helpful in the internet of today. We do not statically assign widths and heights to elements. It's not a good idea. So I'm going to copy the typography one. I'm still going to get rid of quite a lot of it because a lot of it's not necessary. Because where I'm coming from already, I'm already centered. I'm already stacked, so I don't need a text align. And I think the rest of it's fine. So I just need to remember to remove text align center when I paste it. And I also still have to come up with a selector because Figma is giving me CSS properties, but no selector. There's no selector and no curly, so I have to write that myself. So first I still have to target it. So I'm gonna inspect on it because Developer Tools is gonna give me the target. And it looks like that's not what I want, but it looks like there's already a selector getting set for in menu.css. And since I'm not trying to override it, because I said it's already centered, I'm just gonna copy the selector. Because again, you can still duplicate selectors across style sheets, just make sure they don't conflict with each other. So if you noticed before, when I was looking at it, I was like, well, it's already centered. So the code I copied from Figma, I'm gonna delete text line center because I don't need to see the text line center twice. That's too much. So I'm gonna do nav A. And I'm gonna go back to Figma and copy all my properties from the typography section. Okay. And I want to get rid of text line center. And I also already globally configured rubric at the body level, so I can also get rid of the font family declaration. And then everything else, I think, is all right. So we will go on over here. Okay, so it's looking pretty solid, looking pretty close to what we had before on my designs. But I do want to space them out a little bit more. So I'm going to check what the distance between them is. So I'm going to go click on one of my links, hover on another one, and it will give me spacing right here in Figma. It says 96 pixels is what I need to have between them. And let's look at what I currently have between them. Looks like I'm getting 10 pixels on the top and 10 pixels on the bottom. So between the two of them, that means I'm getting 20. 10 plus 10 is 20. So I'm checking that by clicking on the link and looking at our little box model chart. And it says 10 and 10. And so, and I'm getting it on both of them. So you see the green box is showing up on both of them. So that's why I have to add the padding from both together. So right now they're getting 20 and I want them to have 96. So I have to do 96 divided by 2, which is 48. So we're gonna add heading top. What's that number again? 48. 48 px. And then I'll also add padding bottom. Let's see where that takes me. Did that work? That's the question. No, it didn't. And this is a great example of what I was talking about before. My menu.css file gets loaded in before my style sheet, my style.css file. And so I matched the selector exactly. And I changed the property, but it didn't change because up in my head, my menu style sheet gets loaded after my style sheet. So actually what I'm gonna do to save myself some trouble, I'm just gonna go up to head and I'm gonna let my style sheet override the menu one because I personally just don't really feel like working on 2 CSS files that contain similar stuff, especially one of them, like if I like grab a tool from the internet such as a responsive menu where someone wrote a ton of code, which is the situation here. Maybe I wrote a lot of it actually, but sometimes I'll grab something that someone else wrote. I will put it into my repo. I will change it a little bit, but I don't know that file very well. So sometimes I will just simply plop it in as its own file and then make my file load after it so people can write it. Because CSS is all about, if you can match the selector, if it loads after it, it'll just cancel it out. So now, when I click on these, my padding worked. And I got the 48, 48, and then we can see the padding from here gets used for the left and the right, but not the top and bottom. And you can actually see if you click the drop down in DevTools, it shows padding top and padding bottom crossed out because they're getting assigned from my style sheet as an override. Cool. So now I feel like I have my mobile menu in pretty good shape. I think I do need to set the background of it because right now, well, I'm gonna do that with the media query actually, so maybe we won't get to that right away. Yeah, okay. Although, am I going media query? I think it's time. Yeah, okay. So I didn't make a desktop mockup yet because I was being chaotic. I was. But I probably don't want my nav links to be this huge all the time. Like that's probably not the font size I actually want them to be when they're in the bar. Like I find one particular instance where your styles might diverge quite far from each other is your navigation links when they are in like your top row like this versus when they are in an expanded mobile menu where they kind of have to fill the whole screen. So the way you deal with that is with something called a media query. Media queries are fun little blocks of CSS. And they're part of why CSS is a programming language. It's what's called a conditional statement. If you ever learned about any programming language before, conditional statements often are framed as like if else. Like if this thing happens, then you can do this, or else do this. Basically, what's happening in a CSS file is one of those kinds of statements. It's saying, right now we're just saying just do this, and we're not providing any conditions. So when your screen width changes, the browser is logging it. It's keeping track. Like you can actually see it happen in DevTools. It's going to be right here. You'll see a number show up. That first number is your width value. So it's at 934 pixels. And then as I drag it in, you can see that number go up and down. That's what the media query is going to be looking for. And how that applies in context is different devices have different widths. So an iPhone SE is 375 pixels wide. A Pixel 7 is 412. A Galaxy Fold is 280. That's crazy. I didn't know they made phones that narrow. A Nest Hub. Who's browsing the web on a Nest Hub? That's browsing the internet on a Nest Hub is crazy. An iPhone 14, like 430. And then like tablet 768. It can like kind of peruse through a bunch of different values. This tool within DevTools is very helpful with the responsive design one, especially if you're working on a laptop with a very visual screen and you want to see what it would look like on a bigger screen. It's really useful for that because you can keep expanding the window or you can even just arbitrarily, I think 2650 was the one I was working with today at work. I don't know why. It's just like that sounds big. It sounds like a very large 4K display. There's a lot of users on the thing I work on. The problem I run into all the time is they will send us like bug reports and they'll be like, why is the layout so weird? And meanwhile, their screen will be like this wide. They have like those dumb ones, like the yeah, it's crazy. So I always have to write media queries for like desktop, extra large screens, which normally lots of other projects work on, we've never had to think about because nobody does that, but they do. So this tool's quite helpful for that. But basically the media query is going to be looking for that width. And it is like a rule saying when the screen is this big, this many pixels wide or bigger, then I want you to run this extra code. Otherwise, don't run it. And so the way I always write my media queries, there's two ways to go about it. And you'll notice in this class I'm working mobile first. So we're always going to write our initial styles for mobile, for the most part, and then we'll write our overrides as desktop. The reason for that is back when I was taking this class, we actually did it the opposite way around because it was 2013 and we were still learning what it meant that phones existed. Because in our minds, we were like, people have phones sometimes. Like nobody really goes on the internet on their phone. That's weird. Like it was like a in case of emergency style thing. When I was sitting in this classroom, about half of the students didn't have smartphones. Like it was just, it was olden times. The world was different. So we weren't thinking mobile first when we were thinking about media queries. We were thinking about them as the special case. And that was why media queries, it was like, oh, this is for the phone users. The reason why we flipped it around the other way is not because more people are using phones, which might be true, but is debatable depending on who your audience is. Honestly, it's more worth releasing somebody and then looking at your analytics and how people are accessing it, but that's a different conversation for another day. The reason why we're mobile first is more in the designer and developer experience and what it is like for us to actually have to do it. Learning media queries was very painful for me because we would build these beautiful desktop layouts or like multi-column and so fancy and everything. This is also before Flexbox. And then we would have to write media queries CSS that basically destroyed and disassembled that layout. It's much easier to add in your media query than take away. It's a lot less code, it's a lot more efficient, you are less likely to want to write your hair out. So when we're doing our styling, like I made my mobile styling for my navigation, what I have in just the main CSS file. But now when I get into a media query, I'm going to be writing my styles for desktop. So my initial styles were for this scenario. And when I go to this one, which this is a bug of the menu I gave you guys, to refresh the page for it, like on break. Whoopsie. I might have a patch for that eventually, but we'll see. This is what I'm like the styling of bringing the size of these down is what I'm going to be doing in my media query. So I'm going to go into my menu file because I already have a media query set up there, and I want to make sure the thing I advise people to do the most when it comes to media queries is work with one media query. You might end up having to make a second one because there's like a weird in between stage. But in general, try to just work in one around the 600, 700 pixel mark. Because that will keep things from getting horrifically broken and you can always make it fancier after. But like the way I was initially taught this was like, oh, you have to make a breakpoint for this specific device, and then a breakpoint for iPad, and then a breakpoint for this, and it was a really like limited, constrained way to think about responsive design, because at the end of the day, people don't just view things on one, like even if you just weren't even thinking about phones or the devices existing, people do not just interact with the web in one size of browser window. Like, I find that the better way to test things is to like sit here with DevTools open and like drag the side of your page apart and see if everything falls apart or not. That is the way I recommend to do it. And if you have one breakpoint, you can kind of mix that with using relative units for your size and using Flexbox wrapping, and you can usually achieve a good design on most screen displays without it being an insane burden to you as the designer or the developer. Like often when I'm working with the designer on a project that's doing more just like visual design stuff, they don't want to touch code, I tell them to give me a mobile and a desktop. And a lot of times they'll be like, oh, what about tablet? I'm like, we'll see how it works out, because sometimes it's not necessary. Okay, so I'm actually just gonna grab the number because I'm using the 640 number, so I'm gonna remember that. And I'm gonna write this from scratch so you guys actually learn how to media queries work. I'm gonna zoom in really big so you can see it. So media query, you're gonna have to practice this. You're gonna do @ symbol, or @ symbol joins the fight in CSS. We've pulled out some dots, we've had some curly whirlies. Now we got the @ sign, we got it all here in CSS. And we're gonna do media. And look, it's actually gonna be kind of helpful and suggest things to us, which is cool. I usually don't bother putting the word screen. You can, it doesn't really make a difference. I'm just gonna leave it media. And then parentheses. And then because we're doing a mobile first media query, we're going from little and we're changing the big in the media query. I'm gonna say min width. And then put a colon. And then I said 640 pixels. And you do not put a semicolon. I know that's weird. It's the only time you ever do it. At media, parentheses, min width, and your number that you want to use as your breakpoint. 640 is a good one. If you decide that you wish it was happening sooner or later, you can always change the number. But I find most people tend to stick with the same one once they pick one. The menu at the moment uses 640, like it goes from the hamburger menu to the 3 things. I usually try to, if I have like a big layout change like that in a site, I'll try to keep that breakpoint where it is. But using multiple breakpoints is allowed, it's just harder to keep track of them. I think as a first time user of media queries, it can be helpful to just have one, use the same number for any media queries you have. It prevents chaos. So now I have my at media min width 640. And we, inside the media query, if we want to override something we already styled, we have to make sure we match the selector exactly. That's pretty easy to do because all you do is you scroll up to where the thing is you want to change. Or in dev tools, like let's say I'm like, why are these links so big? I can change it. And I can make sure I match the selector by looking over here in dev tools. And I see my selector is nav A. Great. So I can actually just click on it and copy it. And it looks like the font size is getting set with the font size attribute. So that's what I will be setting in my media query. So media queries, after we do our thing with our at sign, our parentheses, we do curlies. And then we're going to be nesting our CSS as usual, like our usual thing with our selector, curlies, semicolons, colons, all that stuff. It's just happening indented one line inside of it. So here's your tab key. I have my selector, my pasteboard. I'll do my curlies. So I'm just writing like usual, but you'll see this line is kind of next to it because I'm nested inside. If for whatever reason you forget that, you'll notice this curly up here, it'll turn red. It'll say, hey, where's your other one? So keep an eye out for that. You also get these like red lines sometimes. You'll be like, why'd you do that? Okay, so now I got my nav A, and I want to set its font size to be, well, I guess I get to pick because I didn't do it in my, I'll do 18. We'll see what 18 looks like. And we'll save that. And we'll go back over here. And okay, now they're not looking so big. And then when I go into the mobile one, they're still big. So I have them big on mobile, and then they're littler on desktop. And as I think on desktop, I might not want them to be bold because I think I was using that kind of as wayfinding in my, remember last week I like made the page I was on bold. So I think by default I should set them to not be bold. So I'm gonna do font weight normal as their default on desktop. So now my rings one is like bold. And trails will be bold. Let's get the rest of the bold. And then so that won't happen on and mobile. Will it now? Yeah. Okay, cool. So now I got my media query set up, I got my scale stuff working good. Next thing I want to do with my nav is I want to set up some interactions. So like, you know, when you hover on a link, a lot of the time it'll like change color or like something interesting will happen. We can use something called pseudo classes, and we can make it look even fancier with something called transitions. So that's what I'm going to show you next. So, and I don't think I want my pseudo class interactions to happen on mobile because it'll just like behave weirdly because a lot of these are intended for using a mouse. If you're using your finger, they act kind of weird. So I'm going to do this actually inside of my media query. So in the world of styling links, there are a couple of pseudo classes you have to pick from. The ones I encourage people to use the most, the ones that matter the most to us are hover, hover, and focus. Hover is what happens when you just like put your mouse on something, so the little hand will come out a lot of the time when you hover something. And focus is what happens when you press the tab key. You'll see like a line go around it. You'll also notice my focus line will stay with my padding. So sometimes if your padding is set like with this, my padding's like kind of abnormally large. So it has like a really big box around. So that's also something to consider when you're thinking about whether you should use margin or padding for something. Like if I don't want this box to be so giant, I should switch this to using margin. But I actually don't care. I think it's kind of funny. So I'm just gonna leave it alone. So like the important thing with focus indicators is that somebody who can't use a mouse for whatever reason, they're usually using assistive technology when they're navigating a page this way. The important thing is that they can see it. So like I have a nice thick blue line here. That's quite good. We love a good solid focus indicator. Focus will go to links. And in general, you want your focus to go from left to right, top to bottom. Most of the stuff we do, I don't think we'll mess up the focus order at all, so we don't need to worry about that. But if you ever see it going like no, something's wrong. But in general, it should just go left to right, and then if I hold down the shift key while pressing tab, it'll take it backwards. Tab to go forwards, shift tab to go backwards. And these are two things that we style. I usually style them together. The focus indicator happens on its own for the most part. I think it might be coming from, actually, let's find out. Focus. Interesting. No, it's not working, whatever. There is a focus there, so I'm not too worried about it. I usually just combine them into one selector though. So I'm gonna do nav space A, same as I did. Like anytime you're targeting a link, you want to make sure you follow its selector exactly as it was. Otherwise, it will lose the specificity battle potentially. Then we're gonna add a colon. I'm gonna say hover. And then since I also want to do focus, I'm gonna do a multi-selector. I'm just gonna put a comma. I'm gonna say nav colon, no, nav A. Colon goes on the A, because these are linked pseudo elements, pseudo selectors. And then I'm gonna say focus. So I like to use my focus styles on my cover styles on my focus. Cool. So now I'm going to set it up. I want it so when I hover on my links or focus on them, I want the underline to appear. Like I want it to get an underline, and I want it to change color. I think that'd be cool. So I'm gonna go back over here and I'm gonna say color. And this is probably something I didn't figure out in Figma. Honestly, people should be a little bit more responsible about annotating Figma with this stuff. Even in the real world, professional world, people forget leave interactions out of their mockups all the time. And then I get to just make them up and it's kind of fun. So I don't. And we'll do as for another purple, and maybe I'll say that they are, I'm just gonna put a random color here to get the color selector to show up. What color do I want it to be? I want it to be white. Come on. The way this works is crazy. I don't know if I recommend this color tool. That one looks great. So I have that color set. And then I also want to add an underline, so I'm gonna do text decoration. And I'm gonna, what's wavy? I don't even know what that means. We're gonna find out. Maybe it's something fun. Otherwise I'll put underline, nothing happens. Sometimes these suggestions can be like what is not even a real thing. But sometimes it teaches me about new CSS things that I don't know about. So that's what I want to happen. So that's cool. Let's see what it does. So now when I hover, you'll see the links change color. I'm like, that's cool, but there is a way to make it even cooler. So I got my hover going on, and then also when focus, the color will change as well. So we love that. It looks like wavy did nothing, so that was kind of disappointing. So I'm gonna go back and tell the text decoration underline. Okay, save that. And now when I hover it, it gets an underline. Because you've heard me talk a little bit about like web accessibility as we've gone through topics. You have to always make sure that you are providing your users with the meaning you were trying to convey, not just only with color. And even like changing the color design to show an interaction, you want to make sure you provide some other indication that there is something happening. So I added the underline just for a little extra pizzazz. And then I'm gonna do one more thing that'll be a little bit more fun, which is add a transition. I think some of you have found transitions already because honestly, they're one of my favorite things about development because they're so easy to do and they're so delightful and they're just one line. I already have a good setup here because I have an initial state of my links and then I have what happens if you interact with them. So now all I need to do is in my initial state, I'm going to add a property called transition. And there are a couple aspects to transition that I think are critical. The first one is you have to put what property or properties you are changing. In this case, I'm changing the color. I don't think I have any other transitionable properties. I'm just going to write the word for color. So I'm saying transition the color, please. The next thing, and also these things I'm listing off, you're just going to put a space between them, and the order does not matter. So like I can put time, property, speed curve, or like in any curve. So I'm going to have my property, which is color. I usually do half a second as my starting point for the speed, and then I can adjust it based on what it looks like. Like for example, if I'm doing a transition of two colors and those colors are really similar, I don't want the transition to happen too fast because you will not be able to perceive it. So sometimes you have to slow things down if they're like not too different from each other. But if they're very different from each other, sometimes it can be too abrupt. You have to adjust. It's case by case. I use half a second as my starting point and I'll change it. So I got color half a second, and then the last thing I usually add, oh my god, what is it? Well, we can leave that for now. I think you'll do linear by default, and I can show you what it looks like and grab the suggestion from DevTools, because again, nobody expects you to remember off the top of your head every CSS property and value. That would be crazy. So now if I hover it, look, oh, it like transitions in. If I zoom into that. Yeah. See, that's almost a little too hard to see, so I might kick up my thing out to a full second. So now it'll like, ooh. So instead of like flashing the color, it like gradients it to the next color. And you can do CSS transitions with a lot of different stuff. So like another example I'll give you is like you can change, make stuff move and animate in other ways. So like my image also, I need to give it an ID. So let me go into my header, committed my own crime that I say to never do. Unbelievable. Okay, A equals. I already had an ID for this. I guess I didn't though, so it is what it is. Okay, so now I have an ID added to this like logo guy I got up here. I'm gonna zoom this back up so I don't forget. Reset. Okay, so now I got my roller skate up here, and I think I want to make it like spin around when I hover it and uncover it. I think that'd be fun. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to go to hashtag logo. And I don't want this to happen on mobile because like I find just acts weird sometimes with touch interactions. You can try, but sometimes I've seen people like pull off simple stuff with it, but I find it can behave oddly. So I'm just going to do this only for desktop, which is, as a reminder, what's happening in this meeting where it's only stuff that happens on the screen is not in like the mobile mode. So I have my logo, and I'm going to set up a transition. It's going to get crazy. It's going to be transition for ease. That's what I was looking for. Speed graph. That was the third part. I usually do ease. I think it just looks nicer. And then if you put ease, because remembering all the different ones is kind of hard, you can it gets like a purple box, and then you can like edit the speed graph to your heart's content. It'll like change how fast it changes over the course of the time. So I usually do property, time, speed graph, which I just do ease by default and then change it if I want to. By default, it'll set it to linear. So I'm gonna do a transition of transform, because I'm gonna rotate using the transform property, not transform. And then I'll do 1 second ease. And then I still have to give it hover and focus, or it won't work. So I do hashtag logo hover, hashtag logo focus, and I'm able to use focus and hover because hashtag logo is a link. Focus and hover won't work on things that are not. So either it has to be a selector and then the A within that selector, or a link element that has an ID or a class. So this is an A, so we're good to go. That's not curly brackets. Wow. What is happening? I'm just gonna start that over. Okay. So I don't have my logo, like by default, it already has nothing happening, like just sitting in the position it's in. So I don't have to set up an initial state, I don't have to do anything crazy. I've already told it to watch the transform property, that's basically what the transition thing is doing. It's saying like, keep an eye on this property, and if it changes, transition it pretty. So now, if I set it to have like a change state in some way, it'll watch the transform property. So I'm gonna say transform, and then I'm going to rotate, and then it's gonna expect the degrees, so I think it's 360. I think after DEG, we're gonna find out. I'm gonna see if it works. And so now, if I go up here, am I in your first page? Will it work? I don't know. Did I set it up right? AID logo. And hover. Did I spell transform wrong?
You spelled it transform.
Oh my god, I totally did. Good catch. Glad you're paying attention. It can also help to just copy and paste the name of the CSS property. And if your transition doesn't work, it might be because you spelled the attribute wrong. All right, let's see if it works now. Wow! It's like, point is, you can transition a lot of stuff. Like you can make it see, and like it's just like one line of CSS often, or maybe two. So you can have a lot of fun with it. I find sometimes when I'm working on something that's really hard and it's like boring, I'll add something stupid like that to stay motivated. Okay, so I went over media queries, I went over transitions, I went over pseudo classes. Was that everything I wanted to talk about? Style sheet organization, pseudo selectors, transitions, animations. Okay, yeah, we can go. I can talk about animations a little bit. Not many of you will probably end up using transitions just because they're like easy. Animations are a little bit more complex. I'm gonna be honest with you, a lot of the time I end up like using like generators online to do them. Like for the longest time, my personal website that I had when I was a student had like a rainbow gradient background that would work at a looping animation. So the background color would just like change all the time a little bit. And it's pretty cool. And honestly, it's pretty, there's like some really great tools online for generating CSS animations. Background generator. Oh, this one's crazy. Oh, big. That one's using expands and stuff. That's too much. I just want to do one that's simple. Okay, this is a great example of one. I make the colors more dramatic so you guys can see it on the projector. So like this one, the background of the site is actually doing it, but I think the colors it's kind of hard to perceive. Let me see if I can change the color. Add color. Oh, it's very different. Do not make a background with these colors. They can probably be kind of ugly. Okay, but yeah, like basically, maybe I should do one that matches the colors of my site. So I think I was doing something with blue and white gradient. Maybe I wanted to like subtly move around. But basically, I can talk a little bit about how the mechanics of the background works. You have to store the like various, it basically uses transitions, but it's time-based. And you can set it, like if it's not interaction based, like you can provide like anchors based off of the passage of time. Or like at the percent of complete the animation is, make keyframes. So if you've ever taken motion design, you do set up the keyframes in After Effects. But basically, I usually do a 0 and a 100. I'm feeling fancy, I'll add a 50. So I have like 2 or 3 stages things are in. And they're using the background transition property because they have a linear gradient in place. And all they're doing is just making linear gradient like kind of move around. So it looks like the background is changing colors. And so you store your animation like states, like your different properties of your CSS property, different versions of your CSS property with properties changed in the at keyframes, and then you give it a name of whatever you want. And then up in the actual style sheet, you have the property animation, where it works quite similar to transition, except for there's another thing you add to it. Which is the name, you add the name that you gave it here. You add an amount of time, which usually is much longer than half a second, because otherwise it will look crazy. You give it a speed graph, like they like these, I quite like these. And then most of the time, like 99% of the time, I will set it to infinite. If you were setting it to infinite, which is probably if you were playing around something like this, predicting a pretty background or something, you'd be careful, because if the animation is too dramatic and somebody has like vertigo and they go to your website, you could ruin their life the whole day. So you have to be thoughtful of that kind of stuff. So like making it like longer periods of time. You see like the shit is like a thing as big as the background. The time loop on it's more like 20 things rather than 5. And so it's worth considering. But like use your best judgment, look at it and be like, if I'm not really on a migraine right now, would this bother me? I find it's a good way to approach it. But I'll like add it into mine. Oh, but wait, I'll do it with the colors I want to use, which I have like a light blue and a white, I feel like. And I can change the angle. I wanted it like center. I need to give it a third color. That's ugly. Okay, well, like that's nice and subtle. Because it's subtle, I can make it move a little faster. It's too subtle. I also like these tools because they kind of like let you preview it in real time as you're doing it, as opposed to having like write a bunch of code and be like, does it work? It kind of lets you have something to start off with. Like, let's say I use this. So I copy, actually I just want to add this part into my background. So I'm just gonna make it be my body tag and replace my background that I have with this. All right. How do I side scroll? Oh, there we go. Cool, and then I'm gonna go back over here and I'm gonna grab the keyframes. And then I'm gonna go back in my file, and then usually I add keyframes to the bottom. I gotta make a thing about media queries. And I'm gonna say a note to myself that these are styles for desktop. And then after my media query, I'll do my keyframes. And then I'll paste them. Copied. Why aren't you telling me like that? Unbelievable. Okay, cool. So now I got my gradient animation, got my animation property. It's totally gradient animation. I can make sure the names match by highlighting it because it'll automatically highlight things that are written the same. And we'll give 18 seconds a chance and ease infinite. Now when I come back over here, like, what? Oh, now it moves around. Or does it? This is actually working. I feel like it franked me. Maybe 18 seconds is too long. I feel like it's not moving. Oh, there's no angle. And it's fine. There it goes. Yeah, I edited it. Yeah, animations are cool. That's the point. You can use them if you want to. You don't have to. I'm gonna get lost in this house. I've been talking for so long. That is everything I wanted to cover. It's 8 o'clock. So we'll go break for like 20 minutes or so. And then I will come back and help people, I'm guessing, troubleshoot and set up their site generators. I think it's probably gonna be the main task of today, because I feel like a lot of people are feeling blocked that, like, if you're like, oh, I really want to focus on my design work most this week, like, maybe let's just make sure the site generator thing is set up. So that way, when you are ready to move forward, that is not blocking you. Sound good to everybody? Does anybody have any questions, like any like CSS things you've run into recently that you want to ask about?
How do you, when you inspect on a page, how do you find something, how it's, selected?
Oh, great question. If I go over here, I do inspect, or I can use this guy, the element selector. And then if I don't have force element state thing open, there we go. It is the first thing usually that'll show up in the list, and you can hover on it and it will highlight it to verify that for you. And so a lot of your selectors right now might be really simple. You only have one page. I feel like a lot of you use a lot of classes or anything. So it might be pretty simple. Did that work? So you should see it like in the right-hand side. You have your HTML thing up top, and then your CSS zone down below. Oh, for you, it's the next one to the right. Sometimes it configures itself differently based on the size of the screen, or based on how you move things around. Like if I make it really narrow, it'll turn it into 2 columns. But it all works the same. Like your HTML zone, your CSS zone, they might show up stacked. If you make the dev tools bigger, they'll show up side by side. The selector will show up in the CSS zone, but you can also right click on stuff in the HTML zone and then say copy. There's a little arrow that comes off of copy in the HTML zone, dev tools. Copy selector will output its selector with a very high level of specificity. Like when I copied it for H1 just now, it says an H1 that is the direct child of main that is a direct child of the body tag. You just need the H1. So sometimes copy selector can be kind of like overly specific, I find. Okay. That is all I wanted to demo today. Does anybody from the Zoom have questions? You're feeling all right. Cool. Question for me and Dylan. Do either of you have anything you need help with? Okay, cool. And if you would like help tomorrow, then let me know because I will be on campus in the evening before and or after the job if people need me to. Otherwise, if you guys don't have questions, you can drop. Cool. Bye bye. I'm gonna stop the recording.